Hello, everybody. And welcome to the stream. My name is Nubbinzink. I am your host on this week's Office Hours VTuber edition. I'd like to go ahead and welcome my guest, Spoofy. Spoofy, welcome on in. Thank you so much for agreeing to join with us, agreeing to hang out with us and answer a handful of questions here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about VTubing.
Yeah. So, for everybody who is new to the stream, welcome on in, everybody. For those of you who have never been here before, the Office Hours stream is a place for us to help share some knowledge, inspiration, and hopefully inspire you and arm you with the information you need to be a better streamer. In this case, to be a better VTuber. So we have invited our good friend Spoofy here onto the stream to help us answer some questions and hopefully, like I said, inspire and help you all be better VTubers. So, Spoofy, I'm gonna let you go ahead and introduce yourself first.
Yeah, of course.
Tell everybody a little bit about yourself. How did you get into content creation? How did you get into VTubing? All of those things. What kind of content you create?
For sure. Well, I will start off by saying I agreed to talk about VTubing. I don't know about helping anyone be a better VTuber. But I have been streaming on Twitch for 8 years now. And have been a full-time streamer for the majority of it. I was a face cam streamer at first, but I became a VTuber like 3 years ago. So I've been doing it for a decent amount of time now. And I stream a lot of Final Fantasy. I stream a lot of Final Fantasy 14, but we do variety as well. The Final Fantasy 14 community is fantastic. So I always find myself just vibing there. We generally have like pretty chill, cozy vibes in the stream kind of deal. So
awesome. Yeah, I was going to say I don't know that much about Final Fantasy 14, but I do know enough to recognize a Lalafell when I see one. So yeah. Cool. So I guess the first question that I have is, I think that a lot of VTubers do start out as facecam streamers, or as a couple of my VTuber friends refer to them, meat space streamers. I think I've heard the phrase used.
Not meat tubers or whatever it is. Flesh tubers.
Flesh tubers. Yeah. So I've heard, a similar story from a number of people that essentially the idea is you start out as a facecam streamer and then move to VTubing. That seems to be the trajectory for a lot of people that I know that have gotten into VTubing. So what was it that made you decide to go from your traditional, face cam streamer into VTubing? Like what made that jump?
So I think like, at least what I've noticed these days is that there's a lot more people who just like are VTubers from the start, or there are a lot of people who maybe didn't stream with a face cam but then become VTubers. I definitely know folks who have kind of had the same trajectory as me that generally tends to follow a different story for everyone, because when you're already like kind of in a space where you're comfortable face camming and stuff, it's just like not necessarily as common to then like do a full-on switch, especially because there's like nerves around like just doing something massively different.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I actually like I feel like whenever I tell this story, it comes off really sad, but it really, for me, I see it as like a positive thing. So I just want to start out with that. But for me, like, it was honestly a lot of like insecurities about being on camera after so long, because I had been doing it for years, but like I realized that so many like opinions about me and how I look and stuff were starting to like wear on me. And I actually had like a small cosmetic surgery in the summer of 2020. And after that happened, I was like, I think I did that because of how I wanted to look on stream, not because I wanted to do it for myself. And that was like a real like eye opener for me. And so I was like, I'm just going to not go on camera anymore. And then around that time, VTubing, especially at the start of the pandemic, was really like taking storm in the US. Like, it was obviously really popular in Japan. There were like Niji Sanji and all the larger VTubing groups that already existed.
Yeah.
But it was becoming more of like a NA, like indie VTuber scene. And I was like, I'll give it a try. And I just kind of like fell in love with it. So ever since I've just been like, yeah, this is my jam.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think that that's one of those things that a lot of people don't necessarily think about, I guess, when they start getting into streaming content creation in general. Is and I know that I certainly, as somebody who, you know, was doing a lot of TikTok, was doing a lot of Twitch content, it's one of the things that I had to reckon with was seeing my own face a lot, like a lot. And, you know, they say that you because you live in your body and live with the face that you have, you are going to always notice all of those things that other people, you know, generally are not going to pick up on. But
yeah,
there is a mental toll there. And so, you know, I do think that is potentially not an uncommon motivation to get into VTubing, is the idea of, I guess, architecting an image that you feel represents yourself, as opposed to attempting to live up to that within your own body. Is that something like you sort of vibe with, like that statement?
for sure. There's definitely like just like a layer of privacy. Like you still can be just 100% yourself, but then just like have that like layer of privacy that like you get to kind of portray yourself how you want to, at least like virtually. I mean, I think it like, when I think about why I started gaming and playing MMORPGs, especially in general, I think that was a huge part of it. It's like, it's so fun to be able to hang out and do stuff with people and like have this character that's like a representation of what you want them to look like. So I think it kind of like relates a lot to that.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that's a great point. Oh, and by the way, before we get too far into this, I always forget, whenever I always have a guest on here, I'm always so excited to just like hop into the questions. Chat, if you have questions for us, no matter where you're tuning in from, about VTubing, about content creation as a VTuber, stuff like that, we're going to be diving into a lot of, you know, maybe some deeper topics around this as well. But if you have questions, we are here to help answer your questions as well. So make sure you're throwing your questions in the chat. We'll grab the ones that work great and then answer them for you all. VTubing, ideally VTubing related, but, you know, I think ultimately VTubing is a form of content creation, you know, as a whole. So there are probably going to be some general content creation questions in there as well. But no, I want to get back to your point of, because I think that's a really good point, that we as gamers, because you know, still the vast majority of streamers are still gamers to this day and age. We as gamers are very, very used to being digitally represented in these online spaces, that you know, being able to dive into a really, really solid character creator and you know, craft this like ideal form of yourself, or even whatever form of yourself you want to represent you in that digital space, you know, whether it's The Sims or Second Life or World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy 14, like, you know, we are so used to being represented in digitally in these spaces. What do you think, and you might not have an answer to this, so feel free to tell me that I'm asking too deep a question here, but what in your estimation do you think caused streaming to take so long to catch on to that concept?
I think a big part of it was just people. I mean, it's one of those things that when people see it more, it becomes more normal. Like, I feel like when I first saw VTubing, it was very jarring, and I think that's an experience for a lot of people. You know, they hop into, if they've never seen a VTuber before and they hop into a VTuber stream, it can seem a little bit like uncanny valley, because it's like, what is this cartoon moving around talking to me? But like, the more you see it, the more it like kind of normalizes, and I think it's just been so all over the place that it's been normalized a lot. So I think that was a big part of it. I mean, just that, and like the more people do it, obviously the more tools out there are available to do it easily. I know like a long time ago, and I mean, it's still a program that exists, but like Face Rig was something that people would use like kind of like for like silly, like, oh look, I'm a burger, like talking. But like, that's like OG like VTuber software essentially. And I would mess around with that, but I never thought of like actually having like my own model, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. You know, I think that, yeah, there absolutely is, and still is to a certain extent, that that I don't know if you would call it like I'm sure that there are some VTuber purists out there who, you know, might disagree with the phrasing of you know, calling somebody who uses like a Snapchat filter type thing to turn into a potato or whatever a quote unquote VTuber. But that is like VTuber light or VTuber adjacent, or, you know, by the broadest definition of the term, that is a VTubing model. And yeah, I think a huge part of it for sure is the anonymity of it. I think that's for the individuals that I've spoken with who aren't comfortable with, you know, having their face out there on the internet for everybody to consume is really the word. You know, being able to utilize something like a VTuber model to maintain that separation between, you know, their content creator life and their personal life is invaluable in that regard. But that also does then bring up, you know, the being hyper vigilant about protecting any personally identifying information. What are some strategies that you have maybe had to like utilize to like really lock that portion of your life down to make sure that you're not accidentally putting out information there that you don't intend to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of goes hand in hand with everything we just talked about, in the sense of like, when I became a VTuber, that became a lot easier. Like when I was, and I also think to some extent the space has gotten safer than it was when I was streaming in 2016. But I have just found that people kind of interact with me, I mean, like as me, but they don't like, because like it's kind of like more of an online feel, I just don't get as many people just trying to like delve into my real life as I used to. Like there used to be like a very, I think like the parasocial relationships that form with like a person can sometimes like transcend into real life a lot more. Like people will then make the next step and be like, hey, like I need to, like, I want to see you, and then they'll like, you know, start asking questions and stuff, and I just don't experience that as much as a VTuber, which is really nice.
Sure.
I do want to say, like, on the positive side of things as well, especially for folks who like might be really like new to the VTubing sphere, or might not know what like a VTuber is. A huge part of like what makes it really appealing too is creative expression with it. Because I mean, so just for those like very basic, like VTubers are basically just like art that is created and then rigged, and then there's software that lets like your facial movements and stuff like track it. But the cool thing is like a lot of VTubers and stuff and the artists will add on cool toggles, like whether you want to be like, I hit a button and it, oh no. Oh,
all right. Hey, we got an outfit change. Why not?
So yeah, you could do like costumes and stuff, which is totally not the button I meant to press, but like, here's a good example.
I love the eye expression change there too.
So, okay, I'm going back.
Yeah.
So like, obviously in real life, you'd have to like buy a whole costume and stuff, but like, you know, if you are able to get art for it, like the possibilities can kind of be endless. I mean, I really hope this doesn't mess up anything.
It all looks fine here. There it goes.
Oh, you know why? Because I'm holding down push to talk while I hit the button.
Oh,
like,
that would do it. We've got a whole new character now. That's awesome.
Yeah, these are also total tangent, but my VTuber, like part of her lore, which she doesn't have a ton of lore, but she's like I had her be like a cosplayer, so I have a lot of costumes from like Final Fantasy 14 characters that she like cosplays as.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. And actually, on the topic of lore, because this is something that I think I would say the VTuber space has not quite fully like landed exactly what is the ideal set of practices here, right? But we have I have experienced, and this is through friends of mine and just kind of keeping a pulse on the industry in general. I have seen VTubers who have incredibly intricate backgrounds and full backstories and all sorts of lore, and it goes beyond just like it's really stepping into a character at that point. It is motion capture, doing motion capture and voice work for a character. Whereas I know other VTubers who, just want to have a digital representation of themselves and are very much just who they are in person without, having to show their face. And I guess where do you feel like the most, what do you feel plays best, in content creation? Do you have to have backstory? Do you have to have lore? Or can you just be like, this is digital me and this is what I look like on the internet now, deal with it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's whatever like fits the person better. I mean, you see it even outside of VTubing and like just like regular face cam streaming. I mean, some people take on full-on characters, like there's some really big streamers out there that aren't actually being themselves on stream, but like it's the character that people see. And whether that's like the kind of entertainment you want to put out there, or you're just like streaming and like, I want to be myself, which is more me. My character has like a little bit of lore. I mean, obviously she's based off of a Final Fantasy race, and she is based specifically off my character in the game, so that like naturally lends to a little bit of background for fun. But ultimately I tend to be myself. I mean, sometimes I even refer to my VTuber in like the third person, because to some extent like I see her as like her own entity. Like I'm coming on and here I am and I'm streaming, but like I'm bringing my friend with me that is my little like digital representation of myself, just like the same way you might like, she's kind of like a video game character.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Have one question from the chat. Question for Spofy. Any recommendations on where to look and get a model? And I'd actually like to just talk about even the process of getting started with this, because if Lil Milky is anything like me, I learned about VTubing when VTubing like really took off, right? Prior to that, it was kind of it's like a fun thing out of Japan, I guess, that like, Japanese creators are doing. That's kind of neat, and then you had, basically at the time that I first caught on to the trend, it was, all of the Japanese VTubers and Code Miko in the US.
Right. Yeah.
And that was it. That. Like, it was Code Miko and I want to say Girl DM. Girl DM, I think, was the other like creator on TikTok who was doing like some fairly advanced like facial mapping, motion capture type stuff. And it felt like such a niche, small thing. But then a lot of major creators, I think, Pokimane and Lily Pichu and, all of these sort of household name creators hopped onto it and just absolutely exploded this thing into Western audiences, I think. And at the time, all I was hearing about was, you can either, go and try and learn how to do your own character modeling in this app on Steam, or you can pay a rigger $5,000 to like fully animate and rig a character. So like, first of all, have things moved on from that point? Like, are character models still as expensive and people are forced down either a DIY route or paying a premium?
Yeah, so there are a lot of options.
Yeah, glad to hear it.
The space has obviously expanded a ton, and it is immensely more accessible than it used to be. It also depends on what kind of VTubing you want to do. Obviously, like what Code Miko is doing, for example, is much different than like a live 2D model, because that's like full on like 3D tracking and stuff. But then you also have like the sort of 3D models that people use in things like VR chat, which have their own program and are obviously three-dimensional. There are programs. I haven't messed around that much with 3D stuff, so my knowledge is like just what I know. but you can definitely like create like your own VRoid models and stuff. But if you're interested in the 2D space, which is more kind of what I know about, I usually suggest that people start out with like a PNG tuber or something, because you can commission a PNG tuber for like $40, you know, like it's basically like a picture that when you talk, it like has a few different changes that it does, and it's like a basic like representation of your character, and we'll just kind of let you kind of like find what you might identify with, but also just like have something in the meantime if you're wanting to like start into content creation but don't know if you want to like invest a ton of money. There's also and my friend went this route, there are VTuber models that a lot of really, really, really cool artists and riggers sell now that are like not exclusive. So you can buy it on like their coffee or on Twitter, and it'll be like, you know, $100, but it's like a model that would normally cost like thousands, but it's not exclusive. So like that's the downside, that like other people might have, that you can't like own it as yours, but you can like, there's so many of them that like, for example, the one my friend used, I had never seen anybody use it before. So to me, like that was them. And they ended up, you know, graduating to getting their own model made and stuff. But it's a really good way, I think, to start out and like have like the full experience right from the get-go, is to get into that. Past that, obviously you run into like varying amounts of money that you can spend on a VTuber. My first, so this is technically my 2.0.
Okay.
My first VTuber when I first started out was she was just a bust up, which you can do like a half body VTuber for like a lot cheaper, because then they don't have to like rig the full body. So it was just like this, and because when you stream, you're not usually showing like your character's feet, like it doesn't usually make too much of a difference. So I started out with that, plus like the full art and the rigging, and it was like $600 or $700, and there are a lot of artists out there that are very talented, that are like getting into this space and do charge, you know, somewhere in that like 300 to 700 sphere, that is really like cheap for the amount of work that goes into it.
Yeah, no, and it's good to hear. It's good to hear that there are I guess you could call them like off the shelf, like basic models that you can just utilize to like get started with it, because, you know, I think.
Oh, you know what? Sorry, I forgot to
please
add, with those models, the coolest thing that I've been seeing, like the evolution of that, is people create ones where you can actually go into VTube Studio and like change parameters. So like they like have like choose, like it's like you can make like a sim almost out of like the components that they've added in. So it's almost like create your own character just like within someone's like kind of like component range. So that's kind of cool.
That is really cool. Yeah. And, you know, I'm glad to hear that it's much more accessible than it used to be, because, you know, it used to sort of sound like, you know, your two options were a basic PNG tube or, you know, model, which, you know, it still could cost a non-insignificant amount of money because you're commissioning custom art essentially of an OC. But, you know, the jump from that to like a fully rigged model was, you know, in the realm of thousands. So, you know, I'm always glad to talk about, you know, to hear that it's more accessible, that people can try on this style of content creation without having to you know, shell out all sorts of cash for it. You know, because because one of the things that we talk about a lot on here is, you know, getting started streaming within your means, you know, always getting started with whatever you can access, just to make sure that you like streaming first, right? Because, you know, I think that we've talked about this before. There's a whole host of streamers who got started around the time of the pandemic and who, you know, maybe didn't see the progress that they wanted to, or didn't see the growth, or maybe had unrealistic expectations of what content creation actually means, and, you know, ultimately burned out of it. And, you know, the scariest thing is then having gone and spent, you know, $700 on a camera and $500 on lights and, you know, all of this money that now is not going to be useful gear anymore. And I can only imagine that if you you know, especially in those early days before things got really accessible, if you were to go all in on a VTuber model, that's money that you're really never going to get back. Like, you can sell a camera, you can sell a light. Selling a VTuber model, I'm sure, is not easy.
So it's, yes, I don't think it's easy because people want their own characters. But
Yeah.
I have seen more and more people selling their full characters and models, which is interesting because you do kind of think of it as like, okay, like that is you. How are you going to sell it to someone else? But it is also an option because there are people who have been VTubing for multiple years and for whatever reason they decide to stop. And they have these like super intricate models that they have like years of art created for. It's, you know, outfits, expressions. I mean, thousands of dollars put into it. And I mean, they're looking for like, you know, 50% or like, you know, just like a fraction of the amount of money they put into it for someone to buy like the full rights to it. So I've seen some really cool ones. I mean, it's obviously like I have my own model. It's not something I could, but sometimes I see them and I send them to friends and I'm like, in another world, I would buy this.
That's really fascinating though, because I was under the impression that, you know, if you weren't sort of getting an off the shelf model off of like Etsy or Coffee or something, like that, if you really spent the money on a VTuber model, that would be like so. The only word that my mind can come up with is intimate. Like that feels very intimate to then like sell off to somebody to be like, here you go, take my face. Like
100%. I think the more common situation I've seen is usually it's not the VTubers who have really gotten into it that tend to sell their models. And I will say, if anybody is like listening to this, it very much depends on like the artist's terms of service and stuff.
Sure,
like
yeah.
People need permission to like sell their full character rates and stuff, of course. But I find that I've seen people who like kind of like you said, maybe like pandemic, they were like, yeah, let me throw all this money into this, let me try it out. They try it out for like a small amount of time and they're like, oh, not for me. And
this
so,
is
like,
awful. Yeah.
Hasn't even really like taken its stride or maybe hasn't even really been like viewed or appreciated by an audience. So like it's a real opportunity to like take that work and like kind of like repurpose it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess because you would never, I suppose you would never see like, I don't know, a quote unquote big name VTuber. I'm blanking on a name
like
right now, but like
Veil was like selling my model.
that would be truly like, ooh, like something had to have gone horribly wrong.
It would be like someone selling their Twitch channel, which doesn't make any sense because it's the person. Like people like recognize the character as a person, but like just from like an art standpoint, for sure, it does make more sense.
Yeah. Question from Gotcha Hooked. How long or what way did you click with your VTuber appearance? I've been working on redesigning mine, and I'm sort of stuck between my previous model. Used to click but doesn't anymore, but every new model I've worked up hasn't clicked in that way. So what I guess I think the essence of this question is like, how did you, like, at what point did the VTuber model for you feel like you? And I know this is your 2.0, so this maybe was a good question for like your 1.0. Like, at what point did you like decide like, yes, this is me, this is the me that I'm ready to put out onto the internet?
Yeah, so I think actually when I got to my 2.0 is when I more felt like that. But to rewind, like initially I had a much easier time because I went based off my character in a game that was already created. So I was kind of able to just repurpose that. I will say that like my original 1.0 model just kind of had like an outfit that I just kind of was like, yeah, I like it, all right. Whereas with this model, like I actually delved into like every single outfit in the game until I found the one that like I felt like perfectly represented me, because ultimately, even though you have costumes, your character is going to be wearing their primary outfit probably a lot of the time. So you have to be really comfortable with it. But I would say like for me, when I think into like character creation in general and like coming up with like a fresh character essentially, I really think just to like my experience character creating in video games and like what kind of like hair I usually go for. Like I know me personally, like there's like an eye color and like a hair color and like certain features that I basically always kind of like default to when I'm like making my characters in games. So like kind of like figuring out like what and just looking at different like characters, even like, you know, in video games in general. Like sometimes I would just like look at like RPG characters and stuff and kind of like see what features really stuck out to me as like, yeah, like that's, I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think, you know, this gotcha hooked. This may be kind of adding a little interpreted addendum to your question. You know, I think one of the things that also may be difficult here for coming up with the concept of a VTuber model to begin with is the idea of infinite choice, right? Because when you're dealing with presenting yourself on camera, there's really only a handful of things you can apply makeup, you can do, you know, all sorts of costuming, but at the end of the day, like you are limited by your physical space, right?
Yep.
When you're transferring that same level of creativity to a digital model, you can literally go whatever direction you want. And how do you deal, I guess, with the essentially choice paralysis, staring at a blank canvas saying you can do anything and then having to make a single decision about it? Like, you know, I think maybe going with your Final Fantasy character was a great way to be like, all right, cool, we've at least got a place to start, and I don't have to like sit here and freak out about, you know, all of the different things. But like, you know, in terms of getting started, like how do you get over that like decision paralysis? Is it just you pick something and run with it and see what happens?
I think so. I mean, I think it's really common. I mean, we've talked the 1.0, 2.0 thing a lot. I think it's common to have a first iteration, and that's almost why I'd recommend like not blowing the bank on your first iteration, because you can. It can kind. I mean, at the time, like I didn't know that I was gonna like get a new VTuber in the future, but I also didn't know that I was going to like the character that was created. You know, so it was that kind of like I don't know. So I went with like what I saw as like the more affordable version within the sphere of my stream at the time, and was able to kind of stream with it for a while and get an idea of what I liked and didn't like, because that's just something that you have to, you know, it just takes time. And like one day you'll just see yourself and you're like, dang, I want her hair to be a little different, or I want like this pet that like I didn't have added in initially, you know, like those things come to mind like as you go, and don't be afraid to like, I mean, you can kind of almost put together like as you're going like a mood board of like things that like you might be like the perfect VTuber. So like you have this like prototype essentially, and then it's like one day I will commission this.
Yeah. And I guess is that like and this might be a quote unquote big question. Is there ever a point at which you feel like you will be done? Like is being a VTuber a process of constant reinvention? Or do you feel as though for yourself there will ever be a moment where you're like, we're good, this is it?
Oh yeah, no, I do have an answer for that. Give me 1 second. I need to turn my light on because the clouds are making it really dark in here.
Yeah, no, of course. Do whatever you got to do. And it's always funny to see what happens to a VTuber model whenever the individual steps away. Also, chat, just a quick reminder, please do feel free to ask your questions. We are here to help answer your questions about VTubing and content creation as a VTuber, and not just talk, although I am thoroughly enjoying the conversation. So please do feel free to throw your questions into the chat, and we will get to them. I think just a quick question: is the current outfit the Spriggan outfit?
It is, yes.
There you
I went really. I mean, I won't talk about it for too
No,
long.
no, please, by all means.
But
Like,
I went really like in depth with the outfit choosing. Part of like my character branding is my character's name in game is Spoofy Egg, so I wanted to like involve eggs somehow. And the Spriggan outfit naturally has like a little egg purse, and I was like, that is so perfect. Because it was originally like an Easter outfit, but I also like made like a really big kind of move to like try to have like the classes I play in the game represented in my character. So like I have this little charm bracelet that has like the jobs that I play in the game on it.
oh, that's cute.
And I'm obsessed with capybaras, so I got a little capybara pin. And then this ring is the ring I got in game from winning the lottery, and I show it off because I'm a brat about it and want everybody to know that I won the lottery.
Nice.
And so yeah, just like little things like that can be so like nice to like just like add it and be like, yeah, like that's the meaning behind this sort of thing. And that was like a big thing with my 2.0 was adding like all these little bits that like I felt like spoke to kind of like my journey.
Yeah. And it's again, it's those little touches that really make this character yours, that make this character a representation of you and your life and your journey.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to the idea of, I think, the 2.0, maybe the 2.5, the 3.0. So as a face cam streamer, the idea of rebranding, the idea of changing, especially like things like username or color scheme or your representation online comes with, I think, a certain amount of anxiety. Yes. The biggest change is always going to be the name change. Like,
I went through that. I did a full name change in like the middle of my streaming career. So I definitely, that was tough.
Yeah. Did you experience like that same kind of rebrand anxiety when going to your 2.0 model, or is moving from a 1.0 to a 2.0 so sort of commonplace or at least understood and accepted within the VTuber community that it's something to like really, really be celebrated, and it creates that moment of excitement as opposed to anxiousness?
Yeah, so actually I have a really funny anecdote about changing my name that I want to tell you real
Please,
quick.
yeah.
But if you ever change your name on a platform, don't do what I did. I still to this day, like I just look back on it and laugh. At the time I was face cam streaming, so I was on camera every day. And I usually was on camera every day. Like I wasn't even doing like no cam streams here and there. And I had told everyone I was going to change my name, and it was when Twitch released the ability to change your name. And I went ahead and did it. But then the day that I did it, I was like, I'll just stream a game I've never streamed before and also not have my camera on.
Wow. Okay.
It was so bad. I lost so many followers because I just didn't even know who I was. I was like, if you're going to change something, try to keep other things consistent.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think that actually does lead in well into the VTuber thing, because I think for me, my 2.0 is the same character, and it is like essentially a reiteration of that character, and that made it a pretty smooth transition because people just saw it as like, hey, like this is, just like an upgrade, or I mean, not that it's like an upgrade to the art, but just like a change. In the same way that like if a streamer gets their hair dyed purple, it's like, oh, you look different. Oh yeah,
it's a very relevant color to pick. Relevant. I think. Yeah.
I have had purple hair myself, and it's it's fun. It's like, oh, okay, you're the same person, but you do look different, sort of thing. So I think on that front, it was a pretty smooth transition, just because I think if you're like fully switching characters, which I have seen people do, I think that is a much harder transition, just because there just isn't as much facial recognition, like people aren't necessarily going to immediately know, oh yeah, that's Spoofy or whatever. They'll pop by the stream and be like, what's going on?
Yeah. So. And when you're talking about that like full change, like you know, and I suppose this might depend on, you know, creator to creator, but, you know, do those typically come with like, because at the end of the day, like theoretically the voice is going to be the same, at least generally speaking, but like I could also imagine if somebody is like fully changing their character, that they may be stepping into like a completely new character with new lore and new personality and new, you know, all of these things that go with it. You know, so like is that for the VTubers that you may have seen, you know, really make that drastic character change, like what did it come with, like a change in lore, a change in, you know, like
Yeah, for the most part, no. I haven't seen that many people who have full on completely changed their characters. Usually, like, even if they're very different, there's usually at least a link. And that's like almost hard to explain, but it's like, okay, like if they were like on a very base level, a girl who is a fish, like they're still a girl who is a fish, even if they look totally different, right?
Gotcha.
But the ones that I've seen that have full on changed characters, I don't really remember, but I do know, like, not to go into like any bad things, but I have seen people who will like maybe they you know got, I don't know how to put this, but like maybe like they kind of like hurt their reputation in some way, and people think negatively of them, and then they decide to totally rebrand, like change their whole VTuber, change their whole thing, and there are people who will like just become new people, kind of like you can with an avatar. So it is almost like in that sense it can be scary, but I've only heard of that a couple of times.
Yeah, no, for sure. Lil Milky has a question. How did your followers react to your change of models?
Yeah, people are very positive. I mean, my community, they're all very nice.
That's good. We love that.
We love them. They're great. Chat is great. But they were all very positive about it. I mean, I think they could tell that I was excited about it, and I think that in the end is kind of how it often is with streaming, is like a feeding off energy, and like I was excited about it, so I was like, wow, this is a exciting thing. I think that they liked my VTuber before, but they were like, okay, we like it, like we're excited, like look at all this new stuff. It's just like, it was just like a fresh, kind of like we said, a fresh new hairdo in a way. So.
Yeah. Let's talk about the debut process, because this is something that I have seen, you know, definitely out of the like Japanese VTuber camps. But it's a practice that started to get more and more adopted by EN VTubers and Western VTubers as well. When you were making the transition from Facecam streamer to VTuber, did you go through the whole like social media push debut teaser type thing? Or was it just like a part of the change one day you were like, bam, here I am now?
So 1.0, not really. I did make like a Twitter video because I was like, oh God, like I am switching from being a person to being a character. I should probably warn people. So I made like a 1-minute video that was like, hey guys, like I'm going to tell you about what's changing. Okay, see you next time. And that was that. I didn't really, at the time, I don't even think I really like knew what a debut was.
Sure,
so
yeah.
Really wasn't that. But with my 2.0, I did, because I had been in the VTuber space for like a year or two at that point, and I had seen other people do it, and I was like, that looks like fun. It's just a really cool way to hype up like the work that has been put into a character, especially when it's something that takes months and months and months. And so while you're waiting for that process to complete, you are like, okay, like let me do a teaser video, let me create a website where I can give credits to all the people that were involved in the creation of this. I had like a little background soundtrack made for my character. Like it was fun. It was just really fun kind of going through that process. And I think in a way that like naturally creates a lore or background for your character when you start to like get art done and get music done and stuff. And of course there are going to be like financial limitations, but in that moment it was very fun to just kind of be like, it's for the debut, I'm gonna go wild.
Yeah.
Like money gun artists coming here. It was fun.
Yeah, no, for sure. And Gotcha Hooked, I see the question. That's a great question that I want to dive into the tech side of things. But before we get to that, in regards to like the debut process, how do you, or did you do like the whole, likes and retweet goal to like reveal parts of the model type thing? Or was it just kind of like teaser video? Okay, here's our debut date. Okay, here I am now.
Yeah, so I didn't do the likes and retweet things. That was just a very personal preference thing of
Sure.
like, you know how like sometimes you make streaming decisions based on what you as a viewer might like want.
Yeah.
Whenever I see those, I don't like seeing the models in like little pieces. Like I just want to like see like a full review. I'd rather know nothing and then have that like experience of the full reveal.
Yeah.
So for me, I was like, I'm gonna do that. So I did the thing where I showed like little bits, or like a silhouette. Like I always liked when like videos and stuff would include that. But other than that, it was mostly like more so commissioned art pieces that I felt like represented my character and my journey and kind of like the lead up to like what brought me here sort of thing.
Cool. Yeah. And like tell me about the sort of creative process also that went into like building the hype for your debut. Like, so you said that you didn't want to go with like the, showing like little bit more of the model, but like, what was the creative process that you went through to like build that hype for your 2.0 reveal?
Yeah, I think ultimately I just really wanted people to like feel the vibe of the character through what I was doing. And so like obviously like you have the art, but like I knew it was almost like not that my character in and of itself has like a personality, but I wanted to like kind of like insert how I like find myself streaming and the things that we tend to do in game and like the activities that we tend to get into and kind of like insert that into it. So I had a lot of art done of like my character doing the things that we might normally do on stream, whether that's like, like fighting bosses with my raid group or like gathering, like just kind of like art of her like doing things. And then I also, a very good friend of mine is a wonderful composer, and I worked with them to kind of create like a background little song for her and like putting that and like the art together and just kind of creating like that perfect like vibe of what I felt like my character was meant to represent was just a lot of fun creatively.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so let's start talking about tech, right? Because, there's all kinds of information out there on the best camera for your live stream, the best lights for your live stream, the best mic for your live stream, whatever. And the microphone, information I think still translates over just fine. But tell me about what kind of physical hardware you need to like really get a good result as a VTuber.
Yeah, so I think like different people probably say different things. I don't consider myself like an expert technically when it comes to VTubing stuff, so I really want to preface that. I learned after about a year of doing it that like VTubing with a normal webcam was not the way to go. I had no idea, which is so funny because I didn't even have, because I was face cam streaming before, I had like my DSLR still. So I was like, all right, like I guess I'll just use my Sony camera to VTube. But the best thing for live 2D tracking is actually an iPhone because as far as I know at this time, the face tracking capabilities of an iPhone just aren't like, like that's the only way to get them. And I immediately did notice an improvement when I switched over to my iPhone. So I just have like, I have my iPhone just like plugged into my computer with a USB cord. I have one of those super like cheapo Amazon iPhone stands. I did learn when I switched to my 2.0 that you're supposed to have it eye level. I don't know why I always thought, I guess it's like the streamer thing. Like we always have like our webcams on top of our monitors or something so that they can see over. I was like, I'll have it high up, but no, it's supposed to be eye level. So it's eye level. When it comes to lighting, I will say if I did do full studio lighting, I'm sure that the integrity of the tracking would be better. But the difference for me personally between just having my normal like light switch overhead light on and the studio lighting is so minimal that I just don't turn it on usually because it is blinding. Like it'll give you headaches. It just doesn't feel. I have a ring light. Like I have various like lighting devices that I got when I was face cam streaming, but like it's just not super worth it. Like I do have to keep the overhead light on, and I think like as I had said earlier, I was just using the sun, but then it got gloomy, so I had to go turn my light on. Because if it is dark, like obviously it won't track anymore, but it's pretty impressive like how dark it can get before it actually loses like integrity and tracking. I'm consistently pretty impressed by it.
Interesting. So it does actually struggle in the dark then.
It does, but only when it gets real dark. Like you can't be like a gremlin, like sitting in like the full like, dark, basically.
Sure. That's interesting because, you know, when I had first heard of people utilizing like the iPhone, because really what it's tapping into, if I'm remembering like the technical side of things correctly, it's tapping into the Face ID IR grid. That is on the front of all iPhones now. Fun little technical fact for everybody who's listening. The way that your iPhone unlocks is there is an infrared light grid that it projects outwards and literally maps to the shape of your face, which is one of the reasons why the modeling and the tracking, especially of motion and movement and head tilt and things like that, is so good when you're using an iPhone. But I'm a little bit surprised that it performs worse in the darkness, because I would have assumed that the grid would look stronger or project better in the darkness.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Face ID works if it's too dark.
Huh. I haven't been in a pitch black room and tested that out, so
because I think it has to see like the contours of your face, because like it has to know where like your eyes are and your nose are and stuff, and it's only when it's like super dark that but you can kind of see, like I've noticed, and I don't know like the technical reasoning behind this, but I've noticed that if it's like sort of dark, it'll get like laggy as if it's like losing tracking here and there. So I'm like, oops, gotta turn the lights off.
Gotcha. Okay, so some lighting, not pitch darkness. Cool, but it doesn't have to be. But it doesn't have to be your like traditional 2-point lighting setup that's like in your eyes and like. So yeah, so I guess got you hooked. If you are able to use an iPhone, utilize an iPhone, I think is definitely the best practices that I've heard.
With Face ID, which I don't know when they start. I think it may have been
10.
the 10.
I think it was the 10. Yeah.
I think it was the 10. So it has to be at least a 10.
Yeah. But that being said, I'm sure that there's plenty of phones that you can get for fairly cheap on the secondary market. So
that's true.
Buy used.
It does work fine with a webcam. Like if you're just starting out and you just have a webcam, I mean, I did it for a year. Nobody ever said anything. It's one of those things that when you make the switch, you're like, oh yeah, that looks so much better. But like no one else notices it, you know? Yep. I mean, it's not to say that using a regular webcam is like horrible or something.
Yeah. Again, streaming within your means, right? How to start posting on social media? Did you start posting as clips or something else? Says Lil Milky.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that I didn't start posting on TikTok until I was VTubing, and that was mainly clips. Yeah, like edited clips. Not just like posting the clips themselves, but kind of finding ways to like bring my VTuber's personality like into the clips, like little like zoom ins on like the fun like faces and reactions and stuff that you can kind of get with a VTuber. I think like really kind of connects the VTuber to the content.
Yeah. So going back to the tech side of things, so you said that you have your phone now mounted sort of at eye level.
Yeah.
Does that interfere with like playing a game? Because I'm picturing sort of because I have my camera, like you said, right above my monitor. It's not like high up, but it's like right over my monitor. Yep. Does that interfere with your game at all? Is that like how do you get it right at eye level in a way that works best?
So I would say it blocks like 10% of my screen.
Okay.
So it's like not really, but sometimes. Like I actually moved a bunch of my HUD in Final Fantasy 14 to the top right corner because it was blocking it, and I was like, okay, this will fix it. So if a game, it's basically just the bottom right corner that I find my phone is kind of in front of.
Okay.
And so maybe like in a game, your lives are there or your HP bar or a button, and so I'm sure there's a way more like elegant way to handle this, but for me, if there just is something blocking, I'll just be like, I just like I'm like looking behind it and stuff. I'm just kind of leaning over.
I'm sorry, there's something so incredibly funny about just seeing a VTuber model go.
I know, the ragdoll basically.
I don't know what it is. It does not translate to like face cam streamers, but there's something incredibly amusing about seeing, because I think to a certain extent, like we're used to seeing a VTuber model, kind of here, right? Just right. Here, standing up straight, and just seeing the character like move off axis in a weird way is just incredibly funny to me for some reason. I don't know why.
You get sometimes when you step off camera, the way that it just like orients itself and it loses tracking can be horrifying. Yeah.
I've seen similar things where like, people take the headset off in VR chat or something and the character drops to the ground.
Yeah.
But no, I think to a certain extent it does come into that uncanny valley, right? That we were talking about before of like, oh yeah, I recognize the vague shape of this character as humanoid. But there is something distinctly not human enough that seeing a human action like leaning over to the side feels innately funnier. And like, are there elements, I think, of VTubing that allow you to amp up those moments of comedy or those moments of seriousness or really amplify those emotional moments that would maybe be harder to do in face cam world?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always kind of a parallel. Like, obviously, when you're face camming, you run into those super funny streamer moments where somebody gets up and they like fall off their chair or something. And, like those are always just a good, fun time as long as nobody's getting hurt. But I mean, it really depends on who you are. Like, I think there are VTubers that lean very heavily into immersion and really wouldn't want something like kooky quirky in that sense happening. Like, take steps to make sure like if they're going off camera, they either like change their scene or maybe they have like, you can have an animation that essentially plays when it loses tracking to like make it more seamless. Things like that I totally get, and I think it's cool. Since I'm kind of just myself and not as deep into the immersion of my character as that, I tend to lean into some of the funny moments. Like, I think let me see if it'll let me do it. So I have like pets. Like I have, that refreshed my collab.
Yep.
Oh no.
No worries.
Sorry, I have all these toggles and they're linked to buttons that work fine when I'm streaming, but I don't know how they interact with a browser.
No, that's totally fine. Yeah, I mean, this is the nature of live production, right?
Right.
It's all, at the end of the day, these are all technical things that people are going to have to wrestle with a little bit. There we go. I gotcha. Yep, we gotcha.
Okay, so yeah, I have a cat. She's based off one of the characters in 14.
Oh my god, it's so angry.
I know, she's sassy. But I also have like different animations that use my character's hands, and when I try to do them, I have like 4 hands if I don't like put the and so like Sophie 4 hands kind of became a joke in my stream where it was like, oh no, where she's got so many hands, and like, just, like silly things like that happen are pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. Have you seen like when there was like kind of this like funny trend going on? Not something I ever participated in, but like when people rig VTuber faces, obviously like they're usually bald to start out with. And so a lot of VTubers will like get it so they have a toggle to take off their hair and become like bald tuber, and it's so funny.
That's just one of those like VTuber. It really could only exist in like the VTuber community, right? Of like there's no oh, suddenly I have no hair, I guess.
Right. It's like the channel point, like egg mode, haha, just my head.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I guess like, because it lends yourself to a lot of creativity, but all of this has to be created ahead of time, right? Like there isn't like, you know, the model of holding the cat, the rigging of the cat itself, or the idle animation of the cat itself. You know, I've seen people, like, for example, you know, if they're running TTS on their stream or something, you know, that TTS will come through like a pet, like in their scene or something like that. But all of that has to be created, right? All of that, you know, that all has to be animated, and that all has to be like, somebody has to draw the cat and animate the mouth movement and the ears twitching and stuff like that. Like, you know, so like it's just sort of, I don't know how to put it, but it's like add-on after add-on after add-on after add-on, right? Like you have it opens you up to a lot of creative ideas, but executing on those, I feel like, is difficult in a way, but easy in a way. Right.
There are, and one thing that I didn't realize until I really started getting into a lot of that stuff was how many things you end up having open on your computer.
Yeah, let's get into that.
Because every time you add something, like you brought up the pet that talks. So I actually got this slime rigged because my moderator is named Cerise Slime, and this was based off of like kind of her character of herself, and I was like, oh, it'll be so cute, like, and I can have you TTS talk if you want, and it works great. But I have to have a full program up for that TTS stuff to work. Like the artist can rig the mouth opening, but people have to have like software open for the TTS like connection to VTube Studio and stuff. So then you end up with that open, and then maybe you have like some sort of deck to like, you know, have your toggles, and you have that program open, and then you have like, you know, a lot of VTubers will have like people can throw things at them, or they change costume with the channel point, and every single one of those has its own like software that you have open. All of a sudden you have like 8 programs open just to start your stream, and you're like, oh
yeah. No, and I mean, there's new tech coming out all the time. Like, you know, we have our own. It's in development, so we won't get into too much. But we have our own Spout 2 integration coming for Streamlabs Desktop. Little hint for everybody who's listening. But you know, you're right. Like, what does that do to your computer? Do you run one PC, or are you on a multi-PC setup?
I do run one PC. I'm lucky in the sense that 14 is fairly well optimized. And I find that I'm like right at that cusp where when I'm streaming and running everything and running 14, I'm like maxed out.
It's like right at the red line.
It's like right there. It's like not causing any issues, but like don't add anything else. I did get a new computer recently. The graphics card broke, so I'm waiting on the warranty for that.
Oh no.
I know. So I'm not using it, but that one has stronger components. And I have found that it is very easily able to run everything. In my current computer, just because it's not like the most updated of parts. When I've had to play like games that require more, I just switched to a PNG tuber because like I just found if I try to like boot up Starfield and like all my VTubing stuff at the same time, it's just PowerPoint Central with my VTuber. So it just depends on your computer parts, obviously.
Sure. Is it taboo to ask you to drop the specs? Like what kind of gear are you working with?
So the computer I have right now is, I think it's a 2080 Ti.
Okay, sure, yeah.
And forget what the processor is. I don't think it's an i9. I think it's like an i7 something.
Okay.
So it is a very good computer and it runs everything very well. But obviously, like when you start up slobs, like that requires like its own amount of like processing power, and then the game will take GPU and processing, and then VTube Studio. And once that all starts adding up, like I have found to run all this and not run 2 computers, I kind of have to have like the most updated stuff. Like my new computer has like a 3080 Ti and stuff, and it runs everything fine. I just personally don't really want to do the 2-computer setup because
Mhm.
I don't consider myself tech savvy enough to deal with the issues that I've
Yeah.
heard arise from that.
No, it does make everything that much more complicated for sure. Like that's not even a question. I think just for my own stream and I'm not dealing with running all of these background applications. Like I have my own background applications that I'm running, but you know, certainly not anything that requires like facial capture, animation, you know, anything like that. You know, but even I find myself balking at the idea of trying to run 2 PCs and like trying to understand, like, I think the audio routing is kind of the biggest one of like, how the heck am I supposed to run audio to 2 computers differently when I need the same microphone across both, but then I can't. Yeah, it gets complicated very, very quickly.
It does. Oh, it is bright, isn't it?
It is a bright overlay, yeah.
Let me change my color. I can do like Streamlabs green.
Oh, I think Voxney is referring to the new Office Hours overlay. It's our
the green.
Yeah, no, it's just our awesome little gradient that goes with our branding. So,
I see.
but yeah, like I think you know what are like. So in order to run all of these things, you do need a fairly like solid, fairly high-end PC. But that being said, you know, like you said, there's PNG tubers, and PNG tubing allows you to have that experience without needing the highest end computer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so something to keep in mind.
It also depends on your model too. I mean, I think that's something that I've learned more recently, especially since adding a number of costumes, is I've had the discussion with my rigger of like, okay, when you switch costumes, if there are 2 separate models, there's like a load time in between them, right? And you can circumvent that by packaging that costume into your main model and having it switch, but that increases the amount of processing power to run that model by a lot, because like, once you start adding all these costumes in, you're like stacking more models essentially,
because
I guess,
it's passively loading them into the system. Okay, sure, yeah.
So the more you add to your VTuber, the more it's gonna take as well. And that was one of the big things with switching to the new computer and stuff, was being able to like have it all together without having to like have a bunch of things. But it is so to say that even if you don't have a PNG tuber, sometimes just a more simple model switch can like also run really well with games if there's like an issue.
Yeah. And I think there's also like a creative way to like lean into it, I guess, as well, of like, oh, we're playing, you know, you use Starfield as an example, but like, you know, oh, we've accidentally booted up City Skylines 2 that is going to max out my computer trying to run it at 720 because it's super unoptimized, you know. So, you know, maybe we load the PNG tuber in your example, or like the glitched model, or like, you know, the model that is intentionally janky. Like there's ways, I think, to like creatively get around that and be able to have a bit of fun with it, you know, of like, you know, oh, we can't run the normal model, so we're gonna run this, like, you know, it progressively downgrades to like a poorly drawn stick figure or something. I don't know. Like,
yeah, I was so I eventually ended up getting oh, you know what's so funny is, this is not relevant to what I was about to say, but I do have an egg model that's like kind of a joke on my stream because I said the egg thing. So like,
yep.
I guess if I need a really simple model, and you know, it was so funny because we had this joke that it was like, there's a button, that's not the button, where it shows my yolk, and everyone was like, oh no, put your yolk away, streamer. That's inappropriate.
You can't just show the yolk on online for free in this economy.
But I did get this like cozy VTuber that I love a ton, and it's really nice because it's like pretty simple, like not a ton of toggles, but I can just switch to it, and it's like a step between like PNG tuber and my main model.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just, if there's less there and it's a simpler model, because like even this model, like just capturing it here, it looks like the movements are a little bit smoother, and like, you know, there's a lot more like flow to it, I guess is the best way to describe it. So yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think you know, the big takeaway for me thinking about this just for everybody watching and listening, like, is to understand. It's to understand like the technological implications of running all of these applications, right? Because I think if there's one thing that I have experienced, you know, working with Streamlabs now for the better part of a year and some change, you know, that I've seen on social media is that there isn't a great understanding all the way always about just how much like adding all of these things to your stream impacts your hardware, right?
Yeah.
You know, because you can run like a 4K video overlay as a, you know, face cam streamer, but that takes processing power to run that. It takes processing power to do the facial tracking. It takes processing power to calculate all of the movements into like rigged animations. And like you said, the different outfits, the different poses, the different, you know, all of these things that all have to now be preloaded into RAM and have to be called up by these applications. Like, and you're playing a game on top of it. Like, it all has to come from somewhere. Like, it's not free. Like, their hardware costs.
When folks sometimes, and I ran into this issue too, like you see a bunch of cool like doodad widgets essentially, but every browser source you add to your stream is going to add like another layer of like processing, and all of a sudden you can find yourself in some, you know, you just have a ton of little fun browser sources here and there, but it really does add up. And I ran into that at one point.
and I feel like it then becomes, especially, you know, if the person doing the like, you know, adding all of these things isn't maybe the most technical or technically savvy individual, there's that moment of like, I don't understand why things are now bogging down. I don't understand why, you know, things are now freaking out, or like things are glitching. Like, you know, it all should be working perfectly. I don't understand. But like, yeah, there is it everything takes hardware cost, every little aspect of it. And, you know, especially for VTubing, when you're running like a fully animated, fully rigged model, it's like, yeah, you're essentially running like a second game, you know?
Yeah.
Like the one that I always come back to is green screening, right? I think that this is a great like one-to-one example of, you know, talking about technical processing power for face cam streamers and VTubers alike. Like, green screening takes processing power because your computer is calculating color values and removing color values that it sees. That's not free. That takes processing power, right? So similarly, you know, every outfit, every layer, every movement in a VTuber model takes processing power. Like, that's not free. Right. So yeah, I how much of this actually, here's a great question. And you maybe have been able to get like a really good, almost like innate muscle memory for this now that you've been doing it for like a little while. But like, you know, if you're planning out, say like your 3.0 model, how much do you take into account your technological limitations when speccing out what to do with your model?
Yeah, so I will say, if you are, and usually if things are getting more complex, like you're going to be in a situation where you're probably working with a more experienced like artist and rigger on the project. And that is something that has been kind of life-saving for me, in the sense that like the person who rigged my model has worked with enough VTubers to be really educated on that side of things, like getting it in and like the problems that can arise and like settings and just knowing when things aren't going to run. And I found that like they're usually willing to work with you and get the product to the point where it is functioning properly. Like, I know like when I did my first stream, he was like, okay, like, you know, do a test stream and then I'll come in and I'll watch it and I'll make sure it's like, you know, functioning the way it's supposed to. So just kind of like having that good relationship with the person who rigged your model and being comfortable, just like, you know, saying, hey, like if you have time, like, can you help me troubleshoot some issues with the model, is super helpful, because there's just going to be some stuff that like you don't know unless you work with it, really.
Yeah, it's that almost like the unfortunate reality of you don't know what you don't know until you run into it, and by the time you run into it, maybe it's a little bit too late.
And then you're like, it's really, I know, and I see streamers run into this all the time, and it just sucks when you have something that happens on stream and it's a technical issue and it's a major issue and you have no idea when it's happening. It is one of the most demoralizing things.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think like the biggest thing is just knowing like the resources that you can go to and people that you're comfortable talking to. I mean, luckily VTubing is much more popular in the space now, so it is easier to find others who might have experience with whatever difficulties you're experiencing.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's good to know that you know, the artists now also have that in mind, right? Because I think that's got to feel bad as an artist of like putting together this thing, this incredible piece of art for somebody, only to find out like, oh yeah, I'm running this off of like an 18-year-old laptop. What do you mean it won't run? Right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, yeah.
You know, so I think that's getting that, you know, working with an artist who definitely knows those limitations, I think is very helpful. So we've talked about the rigger, who seems to be, you know, sort of the I don't know, the phrase puppet master comes to mind, but I think that's a little bit maybe too on the nose. But you know, the person who is very much in charge of, you know, a lot of the motion and feel of a VTuber model. But I want to know what is every sort of art like position in the creation of a VTuber, right? Like from start to finish, like, you know, because and this is just my guessing, but I'm assuming you'll need, you know, first like a concept artist just to get things off the ground, followed by, you know, somebody who actually makes that art in the animation platform, and then like, so like what all is needed to like get a VTuber up and running?
Yeah, so I mean, it just kind of depends person to person, and sometimes it's one person. I mean, my 1.0 was one person because they did art and rigging, and you know, they just kind of handled the project in that sense. But speaking of projects, usually if you're doing like a full debut and you're really getting into it, you kind of almost turn into a project manager, because, you know, you end up with if you're working with a bunch of people, you have to keep track of things. But it's true, like, I didn't have a concept artist because mine was based off of my character. So I was able to kind of utilize pictures from in the game to like represent those characters, and kind of, I see people put together like essentially mood boards a lot, where it's like maybe you have like the character design, but then you're also adding like just things that represent them. But there definitely are people, and this goes back to the person who is like, how do I figure out what I want my character to look like? There are really, 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 really talented character designers out there who will work based off of like a mood board, or just like your floating. It will kind of help you like figure it out, basically. So I would say like oftentimes it is the character design process into working with an artist, into working with someone who's going to rig it, which can be very challenging, because oftentimes artists, obviously, like making a VTuber model can take a month to many months. And so a lot of VTuber artists have long wait lists, and obviously people who rig have wait lists too, and you have to kind of coordinate the two. I really liked the process of working with an artist who had worked with my rigger quite a bit, because there was that open line of communication that was there. Like, they were comfortable communicating. If something small came up during the process, you know, they were just kind of able to handle it between themselves without me having to like liaison back and forth. And there was just like a general understanding there. So that, I think, really streamlined the process a lot for me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I'm sure that like people who have been in the space for a little while also have like their, you know, if you are a character designer, a character artist, like they probably have riggers that they work best with, and are, I'm assuming, willing to offer recommendations of like, oh yeah, you know, I can draw this for you, but you know, when it comes to like the actual animations, this is the person I work with all the time. they're amazing, like, you know, we'll just work with them, and that kind of, you know, innate connection between those two artists, like you said, just I'm sure makes that process way more seamless.
Yeah, it was interesting for me because I went from, oftentimes people will start with their artist. I actually started with the person who I wanted to rig my my VTuber, because I saw a bunch of their work and I was just like, yes, that looks great. So then I went to them and I was like, hey, like, you know, what artists do you usually work with? And they recommended the artists that they most frequently work with, and I went to them. And originally there was like a moment where I was like, I'm not sure if this is going to really work out, because the initial sketches from the artist I felt like didn't really the big thing with Lalafels and Final Fantasy 14 is they are small people, but they are not children.
Yeah.
And so the biggest thing was getting like the integrity of the model not looking like a child across, especially in like body proportions and stuff.
Sure.
And we were having a hard time with that, but like we just kept kind of like going at it. I even like commissioned a sketch from someone else to then bring back to the other artist to be like, okay, like this is what I think is what I really wanted to look like. And we got to the point where I was like really, really, really happy with what they were creating. So you do have to like make sure you're happy, because when you're putting a ton of money into it, you can't like go back once like the model is like fully, you know, created and rendered and stuff.
Yeah, no, because and I think, you know, to your point, like while yes, you can always go to a 2.0, you can always go to like the next iteration of your character, I do think that there is something important about really pushing for what you want. Like, not like yes, you may later look upon your character and think, oh, okay, you know what, I think I would have preferred this, or I think I would have preferred that. But, you know, I do think that there is that you know, when you're picking somebody to represent you online, like you really want it to feel like yours. You really want it to feel like it is something that you can be proud of, especially because it is literally going to be the face of your content. Like,
yeah,
you know?
And I always tell people to like, the most important thing is to push for what you want as early as possible, because most artists, when it comes to like the sketch phase and stuff, are super open to changes. They're super open to like, I mean, it'll vary between person to person, but it's much easier to change a sketch than it is to like have your model be done and then be like, yeah, I'm not happy with this. Like, that's like, nobody wants that. That you might not even, you're looking at spending extra money. You're looking at maybe not even being able to change things at that point.
The artist might even be like, it is way too late for that. Like, you should have told me this months ago. Like, we're not going back.
So I know it's like not always easy to be like 100% with a sketch, because obviously there are things that are missing, but in that like sketch / flat color kind of space, and just like communicating with your artist as much as possible to like get as many work in progress as possible, so you can make those comments as quickly as possible. And also sharing that work with people that you're close to or comfortable with seeing it, to get other perspectives, is really nice as well, because sometimes when you look at something for too long, it's hard to like really like think on it or like make like feedback. Yeah, no, of course. And yeah, having that outside view, I think, can definitely help, because no, you're right. Like when you are seeing, you know, the little individual pieces coming together, right? It's very easy to lose the big picture of it. And all of a sudden, when you finally get to zoom out and see, oh, everything all together, you're like, oh, wow, no, this really doesn't work, actually, does it? Yeah, exactly.
And you are way too down like the rabbit hole at that point to make any major changes. So, yeah. This was kind of a random thought that I had pop into my head. So, VTubing at its core, right, has a very intrinsic link to anime and anime culture. How, for somebody who wants to get into VTubing, and granted, like, you know, the Venn diagram of nerdy interests is almost a circle, right? But like, how in tune with anime and anime culture do you feel like you ought to be in order to get into VTubing? Is it something that you can get into without like completely without like caring about anime, or is there always going to be some some linkage there that like if you don't at least have a cursory understanding of the you know the culture, that you're just not gonna quite get as a VTuber.
I don't think you need to be into. I think that has changed a lot in that like it's one of those things where like it's just kind of who you are, and maybe that'll like represent itself in your VTuber. But I know like it's hard for me to say because I feel like other people's opinions might differ on this, and there's different people that kind of like expect different things out of the VTuber space as a whole, especially because like obviously it did originate in Japan, and like there has to be a lot of respect for kind of like all the origins of like where did all these things come from that go into the decisions we make with our VTubers. For me personally, I don't want to say I'm not an anime fan, because I have seen a few, but I'm not like an anime person.
Sure.
So I'm not like super involved in like that kind of like facet of things, and I don't really see my character as like, you know, any sort of like anime tropey type of character. Like for me, it's kind of just me, and I think like a lot of people more so do that these days.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I mean, you know, I wholeheartely relate to being a nerd, but not being like up to date on the most recent shows or whatever.
100%. I'm like, yeah, I've seen Fruits Basket.
There you go. Hey, old school anime is great. It's I think 90s anime is gonna have its moment again real soon. But
nice.
But yeah. So I think, oh God, Cowboy Bebop's my favorite. Anyways, I'm getting distracted. So I know that we talked a little bit about, you know, sort of protecting one's identity as a you know VTuber and sort of detaching yourself from your online persona as, you know, a way to as an upside for VTubing. And this, you know, this might be something that's different for VTubers, but, you know, one of the things that I really love about going to events like TwitchCon is being recognized by people and having people come up and say like, oh my God, like, you know, I saw you on this video, or I saw you on the stream, and like, I love, you know, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You know, I personally love that. Is that something that you miss out on as a VTuber? Is it something you just wanted to avoid in the first place? Like, you know, what are your thoughts on that?
So I will say that like it's gonna depend on how open you are also with like your face, essentially.
Sure, yeah.
Since I was a face cam streamer before, when it comes to like Twitter and like stuff like that, like I post pictures of myself here and there. It's no secret, basically. Like there are some VTubers who literally you don't know what their face is, or like maybe you only see them at conventions, and they like will put an emoji over their face if they take a picture. And so in that case, like it's gonna be hard to recognize for me. Like when this past year, when I went to FanFest, which is like the Final Fantasy 14 convention, I posted on Twitter, and like I took a picture of myself, and I was like, hey, like I'm here, come find me. And so it was like easy in that sense to find people, and people who recognize me from before. But there is kind of like a niceness and like not worrying about people like immediately like knowing who you are or whatever. Like you do get like perceived a little less. It's a tough comparison, because when I was on Facecam, I was much more and I think this is like natural for a lot of streamers, is you kind of like lean into like your own like visual branding, right? So like at the time, like I always had fun hair colors, like I, you know, had like my style visible, like things like that. Like there's a lot of markers that kind of like represent who you are when you're face camming. So even when I was like just starting out, because I went to TwitchCon in 2016 and 17 and 18. And yeah, there were a lot of people who'd be like, oh, yep, I've seen that like purple hair. Like I know it's you. And, you know, little things that kind of like make you stick out. But it is kind of nice to be perceived a little less, especially in these, I'm conventions. It's hard. Like I feel like, especially like TwitchCon, and some of the larger, they've gotten so big. It gets really overwhelming. Like TwitchCon was not that big years ago.
Yeah.
So I've had a harder time with it recently just because like I have social anxiety and
Sure.
I don't it's awesome to like be with so many people, but like when you're like sandwiched in these like lines and stuff and it just feels like you're like an anchovy in a can, like that's
Yeah.
when I get like really stressed
Yeah,
out.
yeah, of course. And you know, if you're all right with that, I'd like to touch on, you know, maybe a little bit of the social anxiety piece of this. Like,
Sure.
you know, off the jump, like one of the big benefits that you mentioned was really being able to present an image that is consistent, that is predictable in many ways, that is I want to use the word controllable, like
It
really,
is,
really,
yeah.
really controllable. And you know, does that help you as a creator really sort of open up on stream? Do you feel like you're really able to express yourself better behind a VTuber as opposed to like showing your face?
I feel like it does remove a layer of anxiety from it because before I was VTubing, I every time before stream, like I'd have to like put aside like 30 minutes before to like, you know, get dressed in a way that I want to be dressed and like make sure like you know, I put some makeup on and stuff. I'm not even like a heavy makeup person, but
Mm-hmm.
the thing is like at least for me what I experienced on Twitch, especially as like a woman who has like some like pretty strong like pink undertoned skin, like it just gets so frustrating when people would come in if I was wearing no makeup and be like, "Oh, are you sunburned or something?" You know, like just like
Mm.
comments that people don't mean in a negative fashion,
Mm-hmm.
but they like irk you because you're like, that is not what I was trying to put out here today. That is not like I don't
Mm-hmm.
want people like picking apart my face essentially.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, so to be able to like have it just like be that like consistent representation of yourself where you don't have to constantly like I mean even the nice compliments like when you're coming on face cam people who are trying to be nice and loving, I mean maybe the first thing they'll say is like, "Hey, your hair looks great today," or "I love your outfit," or like they'll compliment you, but maybe you're coming on and you're like, "I'm not really wanting like comments on how I look
Yeah.
right now,
Sure.
like I'm just trying to play some video games." So even the really nice comments that can sometimes get overwhelming when it just feels like I just don't even want to think about how I look right now.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. And you know, uh, I wholeheartedly recognize that AFAB creators face this way more than I do as a very male presenting individual on the internet. You know, but like I'll even, you know, I'll get on to record a TikTok, and this was one of my big sort of like, how do I put it? One of my big like reckoning with my own face kind of moments where, you know, when I was really, really, really like deep into content creation, like filming every single day, you know, I'd notice a pimple here, like, you know, a blemish there. And it, you know, it struggled, like it became a struggle to like have to like even perceive my own face
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
And
because it's usually like and to be specific, it's not obviously if someone says, "Oh, you look great," or you know, "Your model is cute," or whatever, it's like that is so appreciated. But when people say like my model is cute, like I'm like, yeah, thank you.
I worked hard on it.
Appreciate
Yeah.
it. I love it. I love
Mhm.
how it's presenting itself. But when it's your face and people say, "Oh, I love your lip color," suddenly you're looking at your lips and then you notice there's lipstick on your teeth. And then, like, you know, sometimes like just like the human brain, when it comes to like, you know, all of a sudden you are thinking about being self-conscious. And that
Yeah.
doesn't really happen with the VTuber. So I do want to specify, like, obviously I really appreciate people complimenting the VTuber and stuff. And it's obviously nice getting like regular compliments in general. It's just the overall like very overarching big picture of being very aware of how you're looking on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. And there's also that matter of like maintenance as well, because skin changes tone, hair grows, you know, you get breakouts, whatever, like, you know, whatever might happen, like, you know, there is something really nice, I think, about just being able to like boot up the program and the face that was
Right.
there is the face that's always going to be there until you willingly go in there and be like, it's time to change. It's time to
Right.
like, you know, put on the new face. And so, yeah, I totally understand how removing that extra layer of preparation can be just an absolute load off of your mind. Because I have there have been a number of times where like I'll, you know, boot up the PC, turn on the camera, sit down and be like, oh wow, I really need to shave. Crap. Okay, I've got 3 minutes. I can do this. I'll like run to the bathroom and just like, you know, just like take care of it quickly.
Yeah.
But like, you know, there was, I don't remember who said this to me, but at one point I remember, you know, settling on kind of the haircut that I settled on. Then this was even before I started the dye. And I remember somebody telling me like, hey, just so you know, now that you are presenting this way and people associate you, or even with the purple hair, like, you know, people associate you with this facial hair, this haircut, and this hair color, it's gonna be like a big deal if you change that. You understand that, right? And I'm like, no, I didn't think about that. Like, you know, not that I have any particular desire to go green or red or anything. Like, I really love the purple, obviously, but like, you know, but like if one day I decide, you know what, we're gonna go teal, like that's gonna be a big deal.
You become the purple haired guy.
That's exactly it. And it does get back to this idea, right, of you know, I've talked in you know, maybe a couple episodes past where it's the commoditization of self, right? You are presenting yourself for consumption in the most like dystopian phrase that you can assign to streaming. You are presenting yourself to an audience for consumption. You are the product and they are the consumers. And yeah, having like that level of granular control over a character and over how it presents and how it looks and how it moves, and the cat doesn't show up unless you want the cat to show up. Speaking as somebody,
doesn't happen with real cats.
Speaking as somebody who has had my cat jump onto my lap and like mess with my mouse while I'm playing competitive Valorant. Like,
oh yeah, my cat will just tug on my mouse cord.
Yep. Yeah, like, you know, having that level of control, definitely I can see, you know, I think frees up some mental processes, right? To then really focus on just the content, just, you know, producing the content that you're proud of and that you vibe with and that you can look at the end of the day and say like, yes, I am so happy with that. On the flip side,
one thing.
Oh, please,
say,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
My chat definitely misses my cats coming. That is one big thing. I have a clip from a long time ago where actually my orange cat climbed up the back of my gaming chair to the very top of it and then sat on my head. And it was so funny because I'm just trying to raid with this like cat butt on top of my head.
That's
and, like,
amazing.
moments like that are hilarious. I will say though, like I did want to, this is kind of like a new thing for me. And this is very like me personal kind of viewpoint is I have noticed that as I've been VTubing for a few years now, there is also a general lowering of confidence, like showing like just like in general. Like I feel like it has like there has to be something to be said that when you are going on camera every day, you're kind of facing that fear of like the social anxiety and stuff. And so going to conventions and stuff was easier for me back then because I was more used to just putting myself out there. And since I'm essentially putting myself out there less, I've been kind of like looking introspectively about how that has like just kind of lowered my confidence in some ways, like about like just like being, you know, seen on the internet, my face and stuff. No, and I think that's a very important thing to call out, right? Because in a way, right, like I mean the obvious comparison is a VTuber model is a mask in many ways, right? It is presenting that idealized controllable form of yourself, and stepping out into the real world all of a sudden, you know, it makes one that much more conscious of the fact that you don't have that mask on anymore. And
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense saying it out loud, but I don't think I had considered it in the moment that like, yeah, all of a sudden that safety blanket's not there anymore.
Exactly.
And you know, I guess on the one hand, you know, unless you go the Iron Mouse route of you know, having like a little robot display roaming around for you, which I think is honestly like really cool. I know that there's like very practical reasons why they you know, why Iron Mouse chooses to go attend conventions that route, you know, but you know, there is something to be said about how, yeah, you have that safety blanket when you're on stream, but then stepping out into the real world, that's just not there. It's not feasible or practical. So yeah, no, that's a very good point. Thank you for calling that out. I think one of the I had a question teed up, and now I can't. It like completely that the gravity of what you just said like completely erased it from my mind. But I did have one question, and this, you know, I think since you transitioned from being a face streamer to a VTuber, you know, this is a less maybe sort of irritating question. But for your VTuber friends, maybe, does the face reveal question get annoying? Because yeah, I feel like that's a very common thing.
Yeah, I don't get it so much just because not only was I a face cam streamer before, but I share my face pretty openly on Twitter. There's all the because I was streaming so long, there's a lot of clips with my face. And also I've had situations where a sponsorship has required like a product to be shown, and in that case, like I will just, you know, get on camera. Like, why not? So I don't really get it as much. I mean, it's always really funny for me when I am in a situation where I show my face, and then there are a bunch of people that are like, "Oh my god, I had no idea what you look like," and I'm like, "Wow, that's a thing now."
Yeah.
So for me, it's kind of more that end of things. I know one thing that is really frustrating that I am so lucky that I only had a little bit of is switching from face camming to VTubing. I preferred seeing normal you, or like I just don't like seeing this, and like maybe it's someone who's been following your stream for a really long time, and you're like, well, sorry.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, the people that felt that way kind of just, you know, moved on to something they'd prefer at this point, and so I don't really see it so much anymore, luckily. I would say, like, if it is a change someone makes and that is something that happens and it's frustrating, I will give the reassurance that if you keep going with it, it'll go away eventually, because it's just a transitionary period sort of thing. I think for people who are like, why are you changing, streamer?
I mean, that's the just innate paradox of streaming, right? Is that if you are constantly creating the same thing and constantly creating repeatable content again and again and again, people get bored because it's the same thing day in, day out. But then at the same time, if you go and make a change, people are like, well, I didn't sign up for this. And then leave anyways. So like, you know, it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't sometimes, you know?
Yeah, I find it can be really hard sometimes, because sometimes the tendency as a streamer is to, whenever you come up with a new idea, rather than making a change, you're just like, oh, I will add this on to what I'm already doing. But like, you can only add so many things on before you have no space left.
Exactly. Before your overlay is just a cluttered mess of nightmare widgets.
Exactly.
You've got stuff like moving around your screen and nobody can see anything. Yeah. No, I think at one point, this again, complete aside, I think at one point I remember I made a stream scene that was just like the nightmare fuel, like take every piece of streamer tips advice as gospel, like, oh, you need this and you need that and you need to have the pets and you need to have the Pokemon and you need to have every little piece of it, and just rammed it all into one scene and was like, this is what it would look like, you know?
That's hilarious.
Maybe pick and choose, maybe be a little bit you know, intentional about like what you're trying to add. Stuff
I
like
think
that.
like I've seen this especially with newer VTubers too, is that there are, and this is across all streaming, there are always going to be things that work really well when you're first starting out and are smaller, and then if you grow it just isn't going to work as well anymore. Because if you have something that's like a widget, or like maybe what I had was I had like people could spin a wheel with stream currency, but it got to a point where it was very like it was like interrupting the stream, you know, and it was okay, like we've done it for this long, like it's just, you know, repetitive at this point, and being willing to like kind of retire that stuff. And there's going to be like a moment of people that are like, I miss this, or I miss this. And sometimes there'll even be someone who for like 2 years straight will come in every day and say that they missed that one thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, it has to happen sometimes. Sometimes things just have to, you know, adjust with the growth of your channel.
Yeah. And you know, it comes back to that idea of like when you make those adjustments, like, yes, in the short term, the loss of those couple of viewers is going to hurt, but it means so much more for the longevity of your channel. You know, I still have to this day people coming into my channel and being like, you know, hey, you've changed your content 4 times, but remember when you used to play this game all the time? Like, you ever gonna go back to that? And I'm like, no, I left it for a reason. Like, I don't want to play that game anymore.
No, next year you're gonna want to play it again, and then you'll be like, hey, I'm back.
He's back, baby. Yeah,
Hey.
exactly. Okay, I think I had just a couple more questions. I recognize that we're coming to the end of our time. So just a couple more questions real quick. The cat cam, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the cat cam. Do you find and do you I'm going to try and like link this back to VTubing in general, but do you find that like the idea of like splitting attention between the VTuber space and like the real world space of your, you know, room, say if you were to like add a cat cam, you know, if people really, really wanted to see the orange cat, would that take away from the experience? Because I feel like I don't see many people like dip a toe into both worlds, right? Either if you're a VTuber, you're 100% a VTuber and don't you dare show anything from your real life. Or if you are a face streamer, that's it. That's your lot. Like, you know, you can turn your camera off if you're not feeling yourself today, but don't you, you know, whatever. Like, you know, how do you feel about that idea of like going a little bit in on both sides?
Yeah, I think I've seen it a decent amount. I mean, I personally, just because I'm not like super heavy immersion, have no issue with it. I would totally have a cat cam if my cats would sit still.
Yeah, well, that's the other problem, right?
They don't sit in my office. I'm like, how am I supposed to put a cat cam like downstairs in the kitchen? But I think that like one thing I also have seen is that a lot of and I recently kind of started using one myself, is like a hand cam. So like if you're like VTubing, but you're like, oh my god, let me show you this thing that I want to show you, like a one that just shows like your keyboard in your hands. So
sure,
you kind of
yeah.
show and tell a little bit is pretty handy if folks are comfortable with that.
Yeah. Like and it's interesting, right? Because in my mind I feel like even if you're not like the most like full immersion VTuber, there's something about like showing the hand cam that makes it real in a way that is like, oh, okay. All right.
Oh, there's your hand.
They have hands. I don't know why I would have thought they wouldn't, but this confirmation feels, I don't know, like jarring, scandalous. I don't know what the word is. But
it
like
is. It's kind of fun though. It's like, ooh, here's my hand.
Yeah, scandal.
Yeah.
So real quick, I want you to and I think this is probably going to be the last question unless we get something really, really awesome from the chat. Can you describe for me your tech chain? Just like the camera's running this, my computer's running this for this, you know, what is your tech chain to get from here to, you know, your VTuber model?
Yeah, so I have an iPhone 12 that was like an old phone of mine that runs the VTube Studio app.
Okay.
Which I think you have to pay for. I don't remember. I think on Steam it's like $15 or something. I have that USB into my computer, and it's on top of the stand I was talking about. The only unfortunate thing is, in my experience, my computer does not charge my phone fast enough to keep up with VTube Studio. So I have to be really cognizant of like actually shutting it down properly at the end of the stream, or else it'll be dead next time I come to stream.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, "Hi guys, my phone's dead." So there's that, and then on my computer, I'm running VTube Studio on Steam. A lot of folks will also run VBridger alongside of that. My VTuber doesn't currently have VBridging capabilities. But that is like the evolution of tech for sure with VTubing.
What does that do? I'm not familiar with that app.
It's one of those things that it really helps to just look at a before and after to actually see what it does, but it basically makes it makes the face a lot more expressive. Like if you imagine, like if the mouth is just like in one place with VBridger, it like can like move all around. Like you can kind of like purse your lip up, like make different shapes with your mouth. Like
Gotcha.
It really like tracks, and like a lot of VTubers have it now. To get it put onto my model is like around $1,000. So I
Gotcha.
It's like one of those things where it'd be really cool, but like, I don't know.
Well, you're talking about potentially diminishing returns at that point as well. Of like,
exactly,
you know, it's $1,000 to get slightly better mouth shape.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I've been considering it, but so there's that. I don't personally run that. And then from there, it's just like making sure everything is on and integrating VTube Studio. I mean, with VTube Studio, you have to put all of like your model stuff into the folders, but once you have that, it'll just load up. And I don't have one thing that confused me when I started out was like, I was like, oh, do I have to like put my VTuber on my phone? Because you see people who do have that, and it's cool, but I've just never done that because I don't even want to deal with that. So just having your phone like wired into your computer and running VTube Studio, it works just fine. You don't actually have to have all the files on your phone or anything.
Gotcha. So is it then essentially doing all of the rigging and animation on the phone and then just porting that over to your streaming software, or like?
It's porting. So VTube Studio is also open on my computer.
Gotcha.
And that's where I actually see it. And the phone is just acting as like the tracking base, just like as if a webcam was plugged in.
Okay, sure. Yep. Okay.
And then from there, just putting it into, your streaming software. Obviously, I know the Spout 2 is mentioned. Is really good for directly putting it in, which will maybe be available soon with slobs.
Yeah. Streamlabs Desktop Spout 2 integration is coming, chat. So, it's my understanding, and again, this is my potential lack of understanding of the tech chain here, or at least like I've never had to implement one. So, I'm a very learn by doer type of person. But the idea of removing a potential point of failure, right? Of running VTube Studio, capturing your face from the phone, because right, like every single one of these jumps is a potential point of failure, right? Some tech gremlins are real, chat. I hate to be the one to confirm this for you. Tech gremlins are real, and now but when you have, each individual jump is one more point of failure, and so I think it feels like, having that direct integration, removing that one additional point of failure is just going to make things more robust for VTubers. So, I think that's awesome. But yeah, I think that is just about our time. Spoofy, thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this. I hope you had a great time. I know I found this conversation incredibly enlightening.
Yeah, I had so much fun. That time by went really quick.
Yeah, I know. It goes in a flash. So I really want to thank you for being here. And please, as by way of intro or outro, intro, outro. Tell everybody again, remind everybody about yourself, where they can find you and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on twitch.tv/Spofie, which is Spofie. My name is Sophie, but obviously that wasn't available. Twitter is Spofie with an extra E because Spofie wasn't available there, of course.
The joys
X,
of branding.
Sorry, X. But those are my main platforms. I'm on TikTok as well under Spofie Stream. I have a secondary TikTok called Spofie Slimes because I'm super into slimes. And yeah, that's most of my content. I stream like 4 to 5 days a week, always starting around 7 p.m. Eastern. And it's a lot of fun. So definitely folks want to stop by. It's a good time.
Awesome. And again, thank you to everybody who showed up today, everybody who asked questions. That was awesome. Like, it was really great to be able to learn about VTubing because I learned a ton out of this, actually. So if you haven't gotten enough of me yet, my name is Nubbins Inc. I go by Nubbins Inc. pretty much everywhere on the internet. You can find me on TikTok, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, basically everywhere. And I stream 2 days a week on my own channel. I do a lot of Valorant content. So if you want to watch some average or slightly below average Valorant gameplay, that'll be the place to find me Tuesdays and Thursdays at also 7 p.m. Eastern. So always a fan to meet another 7 p.m. Eastern friendo.
Well, I always take Tuesday off, so.
Oh, well, there you go. So
I denounce Tuesdays.
That's fair. I totally understand it. But hey, thank you so much for being here, Spofie. Like I said, I learned a ton just getting to chat with you, and I had a great time. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise. And if you enjoyed this content, obviously, holidays are coming around the corner, so schedules are going to get a little bit spotty, but we try and do this show every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern, and we hope to have more amazing people, knowledgeable people like Spofie on to help answer all of your questions about the different aspects and elements of streaming. So if you're not following, make sure to follow Streamlabs everywhere around the internet. And until then, have an amazing rest of your week and happy streaming, y'all. We'll catch you later.
Bye, friends.